Chris Sims here from comicsalliance.com, and this is Here's the Thing. Now, Jocelyn is on vacation today, so I don't really have a viewer question for this week's episode. So instead, I thought I'd talk about this guy. Mario. Love this guy. This is actually the brand new Mario SH Figuarts action figure that just came out. And as soon as I saw this thing, I pre-ordered it. I ordered it the second I knew it existed. It was like something took over because I just love this guy. I have spent more time with Mario than I have with literally any member of my own family over the past 32 years. But when I got the figure, and I put it on my desk, and I had it set up next to Destro, the Baroness, Batman, Randy Savage, the other Destros, I kind of realized that I like this guy in a way that's completely different from the way that I like any other character. Because here's the thing about Mario. He's arguably one of the most prominent characters in fiction. Interactive fiction specifically, but I would say that fiction in general, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't know who this guy is. He was a cultural phenomenon because he was at the center of a growing medium. He's kind of the poster boy of an entirely new medium that just developed a few decades ago. So, unless you're the type of kid who grew up with a Genesis, and growing up in the 80s and 90s, I still have a lot of problems with people who had Genesis. Genesis was for the rich kids. NES was for the working man. NES was for the blue collars. But unless you grew up with a Master System or Genesis, you have a lot of affection for this guy, I would wager. Now, the weird thing is, what do we actually know about this dude? I mean, we know he's a plumber. We know he dates outside of his social class, so that's admirable. We know he can jump really high. We know that he likes to engage in recreational competitive sports, go-karting, soccer, tennis, partying. But that's really it. Mario doesn't really have a character. The reason I have a lot of affection for Mario, and the reason that you likely have a lot of affection for Mario, isn't because of something Mario's done. It's because of something you've done. Because when you sit down with an interactive medium like video games, you are taking control of someone. You're putting yourself in the place of the character. And yet, there's still something that's really distinct about him. I mean, I don't wear a red hat, for one thing. I've never worn overalls, believe it or not, even growing up in the South. I was not an overalls guy. I don't even particularly like mushrooms. Not the way this guy does. And, I mean, I'll have them on pizza every now and then, but they don't make me double in size and give me the ability to take a bullet. So, there's obviously division there that's different from just liking him because you like him as a character, because you like his stories. Because there really aren't a lot of Mario stories. Now, there have been Mario stories that have been told in various media, including comics. I mean, obviously there's the generally abysmal Super Mario Brothers movie that had Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo and asked you to believe those two guys were brothers. Italian brothers, no less. And there was, of course, the Captain Lou Albano starring Mario Super Show that told little bits of Mario 2 and 3. But there are comics as well. And there are comics that ran in the Nintendo Power magazine, which also featured Legend of Zelda comics that were written and drawn by Shotaro Ishinomori, who is the creator of Power Rangers and Kamen Rider. But the Mario comics were just kind of filling in the story of Super Mario World. There was one that did the backstory of Mario and Wario. But they didn't really connect. They were sort of telling the story of the game, but in a way that it was just kind of went along with what you did in the game anyway. There's no new information in those. Now, there was also the Nintendo Comics system that Valiant put out back in the 90s. And that was around the Super Mario Bros. 2 era. So you got a little bit of the story of Super Mario Bros. 2. That also included Peach's father, who was seen in the Mario Bros. Super Show as well. And I don't think has ever appeared in the games, as Peach tends to be the figurehead of her government. But none of those stories really cohere together. And it's easy to say that that's because Mario is a video game character at heart. He's native to that medium. He's not adapted from another medium, and specifically, he's native to a time in the Mario Brothers franchise coming about when story was not really a particular concern. of video games. I mean, Mario makes his debut in Donkey Kong, where there's a very basic story that's a riff on King Kong, right? I mean, that's hence the name. By the time you get to Mario Brothers and the big explosion of popularity that came, the story is that a princess has been kidnapped by a monster, and he goes and gets her 7 times through these castles that he thinks she's in, but she's not. She's in a different castle. So they're very simple stories. Now, video games developed much more complicated storytelling as they went on. A lot of times the story was told in the manual in the early days, but now we have stuff like, you know, your Mass Effects, your Dragon Ages, where you have branching storylines that you can influence. And it's a lot easier to identify with those characters, but you still like the characters around you. They're fully scripted and react to what you do in predetermined ways. With Mario, it's different. And it's easy to say that it's different because of that time, right? Because video game characters from that time, they appeared and they don't really have a story to them. They just, you know, we only really identify with Mario because we played through those games. But then you got this stuff. Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog comes a few years later than Mario, but in terms of gameplay and in terms of how the story is told, it's not that much more complicated. There's the addition of some woodland friends, but that's really it. Slightly more detailed animation meant that Sonic had a little bit more of a personality. You know, he would tap his foot if you were waiting too long, as you rich Genesis kids know. But Sonic, unlike Mario, has had a huge following in comics and media. This is a copy of Sonic Universe, which is at number 62, but Archie's Sonic the Hedgehog comic has been running for over 250 issues. It was around when I was a kid. And as you can clearly see from this necktie, I'm old now. And there's a huge fan base for them. And it's a long, drawn-out story with lots of characters that has developed in a way that Mario never really has. I mean, we kind of like Mario and we kind of like Luigi. And there's a little bit of personality that comes through there and how they shift. But a lot of that is inferred on the part of the players. So why is it that I like Mario so much when there's no real story behind him? I don't really know. I mean, I assure you that I am egotistical enough to just like that character because he represents accomplishments I have had and times that I've spent. But again, I like Batman. I've never done any of the stuff that Batman's done, except in, you know, the Arkham video games. So why is it that I see Mario and I go, oh, I love that dude? I think it has a lot to do with the way that you do take control of stuff. And by taking control of someone in an interactive medium, you do get to experience things. I, believe it or not, even living in the South, have never fought a giant spiky dragon turtle and used an axe to cut his bridge that sends him plummeting into a pit of lava. It's never happened. Now, I've also never fought the Joker. I've also never unraveled a sinister criminal plot, although I kind of want to unravel a sinister criminal plot. Like, I kind of really want to do that. I mean, I don't want to be involved in any sinister criminal plots, but I like to imagine I could unravel one every now and then. Anyway, we're getting off subject. So the idea of Mario is the idea of a stand-in. The question is whether or not that stand-in could have his own story that would please all the people who have been projecting what they want onto that story all along. I'd argue that you probably could, if only because they've done stuff like the Paper Mario games and Mario RPG that have had a much more in-depth storyline, preserving the idea of Mario as a silent character, as a guy who doesn't say much, so that you can interpret the dialogue the way that you want to. At the same time, in those games, you still tend to gravitate towards the secondary characters, the ones that are fully scripted and fully fleshed out. I'm a big fan of Goombario from Paper Mario 1. So, when you have these iconic characters that don't really have stories attached, it makes for a really interesting conflict. Because I like Mario, but I probably like him in a completely different way than you like him. You like him because of stuff that you did. You like him not because you got an NES on your 5th birthday, and your mom stayed up all night playing it, and you didn't get to play it for 2 days because she was playing Mario. You probably don't like it for that reason. You might like it because you got an N64 at Christmas and had a great big old time with Mario 64, which is kind of a lousy game, let's be honest. It's no Mario 3. So I've just been thinking about Mario. Thinking about him a lot. But now, he lives here on my desk. Now, if you'd like to talk about Mario a little bit, if you'd like to let me know what you think of Mario, I'd actually be pretty interested in hearing what you think. So leave a comment at comicsalliance.com or hit me up on Twitter, twitter.com/TheISB. That's TheISB. And we'll talk about Mario. We'll think about it. We'll figure out why we like this guy so much. Oh, you know, it's probably the gloves. Very fashionable. Have a great week, everybody.